Hi there, this is Joe Bouchard, and I'm here to tell you about my brother Albert's new album, which is called Re Imaginos. And he has a couple of questions that he wants me to answer. And the first one is, I remember you played trumpet in high school. What made you want to go back and learn this instrument after so many years? Yes, I played trumpet in the high school band in Clayton, New York, and I felt really frustrated for a long time because I wasn't that good in high school. And later, in my later years, I found I had some time, and I said, well, maybe I should go back and see what I can do with brass instruments, and specifically the trumpet. I actually played trumpet for one semester at music school when I was at Ithaca College, but I had to stop that because I was really a piano major, and piano was taking up all my time. Now, a few years after that, when I graduated from Ithaca, I joined the band that became Blue Oyster Cult, and in our club shows, we did a cover of So You Wanna Be a Rock and Roll Star, a great song by the Byrds. In that song, there's a trumpet part by the great South African jazz trumpeter Hugh Masekela. So I learned how to play this kind of thing. Yeah, a lot of fun. Anyway, the guys in the band appreciated my trumpet playing and that, but they said, go back and play the bass, and I'm glad they did.
Had you heard of this record before you started working on it? I have to be honest, I hadn't heard of the Imaginos record before this project. My extent of BOC material was, the hits, Reaper, Burnin' For You, Godzilla. So this was definitely brand new and kind of fresh for me.
Actually, the first thing I think I ever heard was Overture.
Yeah.
And I remember just thinking, like, this thing's really great. And, then you started talking about how it's like pieces from all those songs cobbled together, and it was a pretty good cobble job. I think it's still my favorite Brain Surgeons track that we ever did.
So I did listen to the original recordings. I just went on YouTube and checked out the original recordings, and I was really blown away. I hadn't heard the record, but I was so impressed with the production and just the songwriting and how cool it was. It didn't sound like what I knew as Blue Oyster Cult. And plus you had all these cameo appearances by, Satriani and Krieger, and so I did listen to the original recordings. And what kind of research did I do? I kind of looked up, the backstory behind this record. I went on Wikipedia and kind of learned about the history of this record and how it came about, and kind of the story behind it. So between Wikipedia and YouTube, listening to the recordings and everything, that's how I looked into this record. But I also didn't want to look into it too much. I didn't want to study it too much because I wanted to have a fresh approach to it.
I kind of re-listened to stuff. I hadn't been playing all that much bass, and I started playing again, so I get my fingers somewhat in playing shape. And worked on intonation because, not playing the fretless for a while, and it's like, it demands a lot of attention. I think I generally play too much, and I really wanted to stay out of the way and still have it covered, and you definitely helped a lot, with, do this part or do that part, and, other stuff I just kind of simplified on my own, and I wanted to have a good solid, bottom.
Okay, you wanted tracks with just drums, bass, and vocals. Is that how you usually like to record, and why? Yeah, for the most part, I like to keep it simple as far as what I'm listening to. when I record. So if I can get just the meat and potatoes, drums, bass, because those are the instruments that give me the rhythm, give me the click, the groove. And vocals I like to hear because a lot of times I'll place like solo fill stuff, and I don't want to step on where the vocals are laying, and also I don't want to step on the same register of the vocals. So I want to be conscious of where I'm playing, what I'm playing. But I don't like to have too much in my mix when I'm recording, just because sometimes it can get too much. Like when I play live, a lot of times my inner mix, I only keep the basic elements, which is usually kick, snare, hi-hat, bass, and then my guitar. A lot of times I don't have the vocals in there, so I like to keep it as simple as possible.
What performance on this record are you most proud of?
Wow.
What song?
There's a bunch of them that I really like. Frankenstein is definitely up there. Because that was one you definitely said, no, I want you to play this, and it totally made sense, and it was completely in line with what I was doing with the other stuff. And to not play the stuff that we played before, that was difficult. I really like that. I think Presence it wasn't so much of a challenge, but Presence was just bliss.
What were the biggest challenges you faced recording these tracks? I would say the biggest challenge for me was making sure that I represented the original recordings, but at the same time put my stamp on it, my personality as a guitarist on it. And I think I did.
Okay, do you remember how the new version of Workshop of the Telescopes, which is now called Black Telescope, came about? Remember how we did that?
Actually not, because that was a song I was not that familiar with before,
right?
And so it was really kind of new to me, and we put that down piece by piece. I didn't even really know the whole song.
Well, I'll remind you. Okay, so what happened was you came over and I put up Blue Oyster Cult's version.
Mm-hmm.
And I listened to it and said, this is not going to work for this record. This is too electric sounding, although there's elements that we could do. And I did a version in 3/4 time, which I played for you, and you listened to it and said, nah, that's not right. Remember that?
Yes. Right here in this room.
Yes. I said, that's not right. So then I came up with something else, which evolved into that version. Did you, when you heard Black Telescope, was there anything that surprised you about it?
Hard to say, because you always wind up having these kind of cool twists and things. I think that's one of the charm of like most of your writing, is that you're kind of going along and you're expecting something, and then it's like something completely different. Right. So it was consistent in that way, that so I wasn't surprised about being surprised.
We didn't really plan to have a trumpet in that, did we?
No. And yes, when I heard that was wow. And I like the idea of having like lots of different instrumentation. I think that's one of the things about rock and roll that sort of can get very, very boring. It's like, it's bass guitar and drums and, crunch, and the trumpet gives it a whole lot of sparkle.
So he asked me, you want to do something on my new album, which is going to be the new version of Imaginos. And I said, hey, how about some trumpet? He sent me some tracks, and one of them is a song called Black Telescope. And he asked me, did you research how Buck Dharma played his solo before creating your own part? Yes, I did. I actually slowed down the track and I transcribed Donald's notes and printed out a score. Of course, I can't play it the way he did because he adds a lot of flamenco Spanish guitar touches that wouldn't work on a horn. So I started with the first couple of notes he plays, but then I go off into my own thing. In Black Telescope, during the fourth verse, the voices in the horn section play a dissonant note. How did that spicy note come about? Well, yes, there is that dissonant note, and it's actually just a seventh. In Baroque music, it would be called a submediant seventh. But I like the way it sounds, and it gives it a little spicy flavor.
What gear did I use? So for the most part, I used a mix of everything that you see in my studio. As far as guitars go, I did use this PRS single cut model a lot, just because this is like one of my, I would say one of my number one studio guitars. It stays in tune. It's got a really nice output. These pickups are low wind, so they're not super aggressive. So I can get some really pretty tones out of it for being a dual humbucker guitar. I also used this custom shop Telecaster that I've had for many years. This is actually my favorite Telecaster that I own, and I have about 5 Telecasters, but this one is one of my favorites. I've recorded with this, I've toured with this. It's totally stock, but it just has this chime to it that I like. Really, the perfect Telecaster. And also for some of the solo stuff, I used my Sen Fullerton, which is made by Jeff Sen right here in Nashville. This is my favorite Stratocaster that I own. Strat style guitar, I should say. It's got Lawler pickups, and it just has kind of like the way the Telecaster is. This is like the ultimate Strat for me. This is like the most perfect sounding Strat, and I probably have more Strats than I do Telecasters. As far as my pedals and amps, I use the mishmash. For the most part, the amp that I used was this Sir PT100, which is a 3-channel amp. It's got a great clean and overdrive and distortion. It's like the perfect studio amp. As far as pedals go, I think I used maybe like an overdrive here or two. It's probably the Mythos Herculean V2, which is one of my favorite overdrives. I use that a lot. I don't think I used a ton of effects. I feel like if I did use any kind of reverb or delay, they were post-processing, so they were probably plugins that I use. I use a lot of Universal Audio plugins, so I might put a splash of reverb for ambience and some delay for some color.
What do you think of the new album?
It's funny because in listening and learning it and talking about it, I had a very different feeling about Sandy in general. It was sort of like, I don't think I quite ever grasped, because we never did that many of his songs at one time, and I don't think I ever quite grasped like his depth. And it got me a lot more interested in what he did, how he did it, and we had a lot of conversations about him. And one of the things I asked at one point was, I'm sure he's written other stuff, and I wasn't meaning music. I was thinking he had to have written stories and things like that. And I kind of felt like I wanted to get more of a sense of what Sandy was about. And I think in a large way, this album really is a tremendous tribute to him. I mean, his writing is just, it's really cool.
How do you think this album differentiates itself from the original Imaginos?
I think it's a bit more organic, quite a bit more organic. Rhythmically, it is far more interesting. Frankenstein being a tango is just fabulous. Astronomy, which is something I mean, I played guitar on that song. I played bass on that song, like, you know, in the Brain Surgeons, and doing it this way with really paring it down and having the vocal be so much more of a part of the music. And I don't mean really not the lead vocal, but the oohs, ooh, and that really sent me a long distance. And I think in terms of it might be truer to Sandy's vision, and if not, it's, I think, a truer interpretation of what he had in mind.
In Imaginos, the other song that I played trumpet on, he asked me, did it take a while for this part to come together? Not really. The opening crescendo I really thought was cool, and that took a while to get that right. But the solo was pretty fun to play, and I think it's something that the fans are really going to like.
It's funny because so many of the tunes that we had done before feel so much righter now. You know, Frankenstein has whereas before it was a straight ahead rock song, and yes, the lyrics were all there. Now you really hear the lyrics and you get the sense of what was going on. You know, the notion of the 100 names of God, and you can add one more, the curse of life eternal. It really, I think it communicates what it's about better than the straight ahead rock version. It really gives it space and as a listener, the ability to follow what was going on.
How do you think these versions of the songs compare to the original versions? Well, I think all of these are better than the original. It is a very listenable album. You can easily listen to this on repeat without getting a lot of ear fatigue. But I think Albert really interprets the songs in a very sort of friendly and warm style that our fans are going to love.
And I think part of what always impressed me about any of Sandy's songs were they always seemed like they were telling you something. And but it's not so obvious. I still have lots of questions. But you know, I really liked that about them, and sort of reconnoitered what I thought about them.
Did I have a favorite track to work on? I thought all of the tracks that I did were exciting, really cool arrangements. I think the most memorable one for me was the siege and investiture of Baron von Frankenstein's castle at Weiseria. Yeah, I'm reading that because that's a long song title. I think just the title alone is amazing, but I thought that was a cool arrangement of the song, and you know, I got to shred a little bit, so it's just one of those epic songs that's on the record, and that's the one that stands out to me.
Presence is definitely up there. Magna is definitely up there. Frankenstein is definitely up there. Gil Blanco, which is so different than everything else, and that actually might be my favorite. Just it's quirky and beautiful.
Your vocals are great on that.
Thank
by
you.
the way.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to performing that.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to performing Blue Oyster Cult singing. We understand while going dun 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 dun.
Well, you've heard it all. Yes, I've heard it all. And what is your favorite track on the album? Well, my favorite track is the last one, the 12th track on the album, which is called Les Invisibles. It just has a great groove, really rocks out, and I love the chanting, 7, 7, 7, 7. Yeah, I think the fans are really going to love that. But there's so many great tracks on this album, classics, reimagined for the Re Imaginos. The fans are really going to love it. So that's my story. Bye for now. Enjoy the album.